All right, welcome. This is step 11 of our Easier Ways journey. So on behalf of Randy, who is here with me, and myself, welcome back. So this is going to be part of my YouTube channel, part of the Living Library Time Bank. So just a reminder that all of the time that you have spent with us, that you spend reading or watching videos, especially Randy's book as well, those are all hours that you can redeem at the Living Library Time Bank. So let's get into it because we're on the final leg of our journey here, Randy, and it's bittersweet in a way. But yeah, let's just go right into step 11. And if you've been following along, we've been doing the last the entire 12-step journey, and we've been doing these recordings every other week for the past 2 months or so. But yeah, I'll start with the Underearners Anonymous Step 11 from their website. What it reads is sought through prayer and meditation to improve our conscious contact with God as we understand God, praying only for knowledge of God's will for us and the power to carry that out. So now I'll go to you, Randy, and I'll have you read the easier ways version of Step 11.
So, my version of that is we sought to improve our awareness and understanding of ourselves and the world through self-reflection and meditation. I
Very
think
good.
the commonality of all this is enhancing our awareness and understanding through reflection and meditation.
Yes, yes. So, can you speak to a little bit of your journey in so for instance with the most of the 12 steps plans, it's kind of has spiritual wording about reflecting on God, doing God's will. The wording here in Easy Ways is understanding of ourselves and the world. Can you speak to a little bit of your journey in that phrasing where, rather than turning it out and looking towards, religious ideology, turning it in and about our perception and our understanding of ourselves? Yeah, please, if you will, speak to that.
So, this has been an ongoing challenge of mine, trying to articulate something that has affected me deeply. And it's again, it's if it doesn't make sense to you, it's probably because it doesn't really make sense to me. Uh, but there is something that the mystics have talked about for thousands of years, and that's oneness, the unification of all life. Um, and in more modern times, psychology, talks about the ego. And myself, for the longest time, I I had the definition of ego as being the arrogant, the person who thought they were special and significant and such. A lot of times there was grandiosity in what I was envisioning ego is, but anymore it's the personal self, the self-concept, my worldview, these ideas that have me separate, identifying with my body and such, that is valid. Again, all this is real. This is happening approximately 8 billion times 24/7 in this world. But to have a knowing that it is also true that there is one energy, there is one, I don't know, power that is giving life to everything here. And underneath all that thinking that I carry on, what I refer to in the book is my personal thinking. Then again,
Mhm.
I see as totally valid. I do not want to impose upon anybody an intention of spiritual bypassing. I embrace my humanness, but I don't identify with my thoughts, my beliefs, my biases, my opinions, my judgments as much as I have in the past. Did that make any sense?
Absolutely, absolutely, it does. And the way I like to frame it sometimes is that if you're looking at the concept of oneness, I was actually talking about this a little bit at Circle of Miracles this morning. We put words on things that we don't quite understand, we're fish swimming in the water, but how does the fish describe the water? and this what I think of as this universal principle of oneness. Uh, the simple word for it is love, and being able to see love reflected in your experience is the natural state of being. And as you are identifying personal thinking, the way I like to frame that is that it's all one soul, but there's 8 billion different stories. There's 8 billion different perspectives. So there's it kind of when you think of the oneness and the love for all for all creation, for all things, sometimes we tell ourselves the story that we're separate. And that's where the universal principle of polarity comes in, where, there's this, I don't want to call it an illusion, but it's an experience of separateness. And through that experience, then there's others expressions of this oneness, and this this law of one, so to speak. But when you get past the story and you get past the personal thinking, that's where we come back into understanding of that which is beyond our thinking mind or our rational thought. Call that God, call that source, call that all there is, whatever placeholder name you want to put on it. It's about reconciling, kind of reconciling your own personal story to the experience of being part of all that is, or God, or whatever placeholder name you want to put on it. So that's what I'm taking from this, and what I'm hearing, and reflecting back to you, Randy.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So I guess maybe we should also tie this in with under earners as
Yeah.
well. Okay. So with a knowing that really doesn't need apology or explanation. This is what I believe. Okay. And I really truly have confidence that no matter what's going on right now, and as we're recording this, the world is pretty bonkers, to say the least.
Hmm.
And I have faith that everything's working as exactly as it should be,
Yeah.
despite me not understanding this. If you said, wait a minute, Randy, can you explain this? I do not have empirical evidence of this. And
Hmm.
this is where it becomes a challenge to speak from the logical mind, from my intellect. And when you talked about referring to it as love, yes, it's more of something that emanates from my heart, my essence, my being. And when I connect with people like yourself, there's just a knowing that we're okay.
Yeah.
And in regards to under earners, it's like, yeah, money's tight, inflation's skyrocketing. Um, every dollar means more than it ever has before, at least in my life.
Yeah.
But again, I'm not one of spiritual bypass stuff. But all in all, I know myself, my wife, my loved ones, society in large. Despite it being something I don't think anybody would want to volunteer for, we're okay. And we've always been okay, and we will always be okay. It's just this personal thinking stuff. Again, my biases, my beliefs, my opinions, my judgments and stuff that get me going into a place where, I don't know, I'm kind of throwing gas on all the craziness. So,
Yeah. Yeah. What has come up for me in all of this as well, too, in response to, why there are stories of under earning, and why there are stories of even social classes, where there are haves and have nots. Where I found peace, and where I found a deeper understanding, maybe even a deeper understanding through meditation, is after taking responsibility for my own misperceptions. I'm starting to turn my attention to the system, what is systemically just not working. Um, and when I say not working, what I mean by that is why, where are, where is our system rewarding behaviors that have been causing pain or has been somewhat of the source of pain? And how do I take responsibility for, for gently calling attention to that? So rather than look at personalities or blame personalities or compare myself to other personalities, I'm starting to ask questions about, does the system reward visibility rather than authenticity? Why does the system punish, those of us who are trying to be authentic and expressing the pain, the pain of being a part of this system, as whether or not it's falling apart or whether or not it's doing exactly what it should for the people who, who benefit from it. Um, I've just been finding a lot more peace in looking at it from a systemic level rather than looking at any kind of personal defects. We're not broken. Looking whether it's not my own personal defects or whether or not it's the pain of someone else that's being expressed through the system. And yeah, yeah. So anyway, when I was looking at step 11 for today, I don't know if I would call it meditation, but I've been doing a lot of reflection on on what is it going to take? What is it going to take to help each other, to work through whatever our own personal stories are, whatever our personal pain might be, and then start to direct that energy toward changing the system rather than fighting against the system. So anyway, that's what's alive for me when reflecting on the prayer and the meditation and understanding where your words I think are resonating a lot with me, understanding myself and the world, but more importantly, understanding how I interact with the world or with my concept of the world. And that's kind of where my understanding of God is continuing to expand. So yeah, anyway, that's where I'm at. Not you know, not offering up any kind of any kind of a lecture or anything like that. But that's just what's alive for me when thinking about and reflecting on step 11 and the continuous prayer and meditation to improve either our conscious contact with God or with understanding ourselves and the world.
Well, the reason why I've been speaking the way I have so far is I believe the antidote to so many of the system, again, just unhealthy relationships, either
Mm,
in individually personal relationships or the collective relationships of societies and such, is the lack of a deep knowing that we are all interconnected. Again, whatever your belief system is, whatever book you focus on in the teachings and such, as there is, to the best of my knowledge, a commonality of this oneness. And if people were to go from their heads to their hearts and their daily actions would be in alignment with what many of these teachings have, when you see somebody truly as yourself, the only reason why you wouldn't be giving and loving and patient and kind is because you've been traumatized. So kind of segues back into this. My hypothesis with this under earners thing, at least for my life and such, was my insecurities. I didn't feel like I was deserving of it. Um, I had all kinds of rationale. All again, when I talk about my opinions and my judgments and such as that, the stories is and such. But as I've slowly been making this spiritual awakening, or by the deliberate intention of prayer, meditation, and mindfulness, um, and it's basically I've been unlearning. I started saying making this happen, but it's an unlearning of all these things that have been blocking me from this awareness. Um, I I like myself. Okay. I like you. I like all human beings. I have this thing that I've never been able to have before, that I can see similarities instead of differences. And it's an empathy without pity, I do not see myself above or below any other. We've talked about in other sessions talking about horizontal relationships. Um, I recognize how there's many people that have vertical relationships. I've had people say outright, "No, you're very mistaken, Randy. There are people that are better than others," and mean it with as much sincerity as I just said the words I did. So I do this, but where my hypothesis of this collective traumatization is because I am aware that I have gone through life experiences and the emotional charge has not been cleared. The Hindus talk about samskaras, and they talk about them also generational traumas as well, of caring from previous lives. And again, if you're listening to this and this is getting a little too esoteric and stuff, please forgive me, but this is my truth. That I do agree that our life continues after this body decays. And therefore, it would also be logical that this life existed before this body did as well, too. Meaning, again, that I find the hypothesis of reincarnation very probable. Again, if energy cannot be destroyed, if what scientists say. So the energy of life continues and it just is taking on different forms. But again, I have life experiences, interpretations of moments in my life where I didn't feel safe and I haven't processed that energy. And it was basically clogging the pipes of an energy of a consciousness of this love flowing through me. And as this work, as I've been unlearning those things, allowing those emotions to be processed, not, doing my best to have a regulation as well as an allowing. Um, Meaning I'm only human. I am not a Zen master and stuff. I can still get upset. That's a fact. But on the other hand, there's a lot of times when I can just feel it somatically in my body and such. I know it's percolating and stuff. And I can, the thoughts still come, but as I said, I'm not identifying with them as well. Some people may have heard changing your language from I am angry to I am feeling angry. And if you haven't done that before, it is a subtle nuance. But again, I am not identifying as anger. I am not anger. I am feeling anger. And it took me a long time to understand I am separate from my thoughts and my emotions. And again, so any insecurities that I've had, any challenges that I've had, frustrations with the system and with other individuals and such, realizing much in the same way that's basic truth. These thoughts I'm having about the situation and such, they're just thoughts. And like all humans, some of these thoughts are very important to me. They come back to basically survival, usually. But with a spiritual thing of saying it's like, yeah, but Randy, this isn't your only life. Yeah, you only live once. Okay, Randy might only live once. I have no idea whether this personality will continue on to the next realm. But all in all, Randy's just an expression of this energy for a brief amount of time. But it's a blink of the eye when you look at the timeline just of this earth. So again, I hope I'm not losing anybody that's listening to this, but I hope really truly that there's some points to ponder here if we are all truly one. And
Yeah.
we are going to get through this, whether it's coming back into this realm or staying in this realm or whatever, but in the grand scheme of things and such, um, there's an okayness. And that's allows me to be a lot more gentle and kind to myself and to others.
Yeah. Yeah, I want to reflect back, Randy, too, is this concern about getting, esoteric with this conversation. From what I understand, that's where these 12 steps are really leading to. So even if we never make it to the 11th step or the 12th step, where it's asking us, to be aware of the bigger picture, that's okay too. I want to say that that is okay too. And I also want to validate your point as well about our willingness and even having the support to begin to look at trauma. And I've been, I've been very aware of my trauma, especially in these latter stages of the steps as well too. And I used to describe things as, or I used to describe events as being triggered by political trauma, religious trauma, financial trauma. I'm coming to the understanding now that all of this is all trauma, but they're stories. They're the stories I'm telling myself about politics, about religion, and about finances. And what I've come to what I've come to understand is that really for me the way forward is being able to just hold space for that trauma and let it be, let the stories be without judgment of them and without having to press anyone to push for a certain belief or for anything like that. And my trauma has been having institutional doors slammed in my face. And the story I'm telling myself is that I was not worthy, or I was never worthy to be in these intellectual spaces or in these spaces where people I used to consider as being smarter than me or better than me. I'm realizing that that story is not holding up anymore. That story does just not hold true. And coming back to this awareness between the facts of the matter, the stories we tell ourselves, and the feelings, I think is has really been a good complement to this 12 step work, because just by identifying, being able to identify the trauma, it's easier to reflect on it, to meditate on it, and to accept help, to accept companionship. Because I think, again, getting back to that state of oneness or that state of connectedness, I'm recognizing in myself how much I isolate and how much I push people away. And these productions that you and I have been putting out there, and just having the conversation and the simplicity of just having the conversation, to me is a reflection of, the divine or of God or of source saying, you know what, it is okay. Just like you had said, it is okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And yeah, I want to reflect back how you talked about this is what it all leads to. Yeah.
Mhm.
In my experience, all the steps are leading up to 10, 11, and 12. And we talked about in the previous session about, I frame that up as self-awareness. Now, not being self-critical, self-consciousness, just being aware what's going on right now. And it dovetails very nicely into it's like, okay, here's the self. Now this one is like, okay, what about self with a big S?
Mhm.
It's next level kind of stuff, but then it's also kind of getting micro as well. It's the paradox. It is something. Yeah, it's very much the connection is within me and it's within or without through there. So, and we'll get into with the 12th of being service. So I see in the lateral, it's like, okay, I know myself better. Okay. And I know my higher self better and that interconnected. And for me, it's the 12th step of being of service is just a very natural progression and such. Much as I've come to like myself and take care of myself and do everything that I am consciously aware of to no longer cause self-harm. Again, this wellness is reverberating through relationships. Um, I guess maybe an analogy for this might be your children. Okay, your children, you can see they're an extension of yourself. Little mini me's running around and stuff. And certainly there are some people that are mentally ill that don't care for their kids, or my parents didn't care for me necessarily in a nurturing, meaningful way. I believe they were carrying stuff that they were just very, very challenged. Not trying to diagnose other people and such, but my parents had Hertz hangups and they had no
Mhm.
friends. To just it's
Mhm.
simplest way. You can imagine a human being that doesn't have a single friend in this world. Both of them. They never had anyone they ever talked to on the phone, went over to somebody's house, had them over here my entire life. People who have that type of isolation and such are just not wired to be in humanity. And if you're not wired in humanity, then stuff, yeah, then you're living with these stories, these narratives we've been referencing and such. That's your reality, probably even more so than it would be for us that are interacting with others and such. But yeah, so I grew up in a dysfunctional household. I perpetuated my rebelliousness of that and stuff. And without turning this into a big long speech and such, it took eventually the pain and the suffering to reconsider who I am and how I interact with life, my relationship with life. And it's taken a long time to be able to speak these words I have today. I've been sober 19 years. This journey has been going on for almost 2 decades. Um, but that's also part of as I'm projecting that upon the collective consciousness. Eventually, it's going to get so bad that there's going to be a lot of people, millions and millions of people, is my hypothesis, that are just like, it just doesn't work anymore. We've got to reconsider a different way. Now, much like how there's addicts and alcoholics that die deep in their disease, they've never had, much of any wellness in them. It's progressively gotten worse. Yeah, I think so. There'll be parts of society and stuff that will fight this to the end kind of stuff. But I have faith that humanity will, much like how we've lived through all kinds of stuff, famines and wars and ice ages and all that kind of stuff. I have faith that humanity will get through this. Or I could be totally wrong. And it's just it's just another story of wishful thinking. But yeah, if anyone here has lived the life of a person in recovery and has gone through a personal transformation, or have seen it in someone else. Their life has totally changed um, dramatically enough that you might use the word miracle for it. Um, that's my projection out to the collective consciousness. I really truly think we are going to recover, um, not just hope. Hope will be probably the first phase because we'll see it happening in mass, but there'll be a liberation of this love that's beyond emotion. It's just this life-giving energy that gets commonly referred to as love, but there'll be much more. Again, I use the word wellness repeatedly and stuff. We'll be a much healthier society. We'll be much more supportive, nurturing. Um, And where that goes, I don't know, but that's what I've seen in my life and the recovery of others is basically you go from being your own worst enemy to being somebody who's patient, kind with yourself and with others. And you want other people to have that same experience if they desire it. I'm not here to sell anybody on this, but it is what's given me hope.
Yeah. Yeah, I like to describe it as we're not really teaching anybody anymore. We're just kind of role modeling what the relationships might look like in this new world or this new ways of being. And to wrap up this particular section here, because we're coming up to the half-hour mark, I wanted to first ask you, Randy, do you practice any deliberate self-reflection or meditation or anything like that? Do you personally have any rituals where you're doing that on a day-to-day basis, or can you speak to that a little bit? Because when we leave this section, I'm going to challenge the listener to to think about whether or not they want to create a ritual or create a habit of reflection and meditation. But I wanted to ask you about your process on that. Do you have a deliberate conscious process, or how do you work with that?
Well, for years I did something that was called contemplative prayer, and that's doing the best you can to clear the busy mind, is to focus
Mhm.
on the breath, to get still. I've never had a total emptiness, but I've made room for things to come that were epiphanies and such a calming of the mind and stuff, kind of like going offline for a while. And then being mindful is being online and still having had that type of, I don't know, experience of what it's like not to be running a mile a minute, kind of in the brain, the overthinking. But that's just very naturally has not been something that I require. I wake up before I open my eyes. I say a short little prayer of gratitude. Thank you for this sleep. Thank you for this bed. Thank you for this life. That type of thing. If I get some water and stuff, I thank for the water and stuff. About the first 5-10 minutes and such, it's being mindful of everything that is life giving for me, and that sets the tone to make things much more likely to focus on uh, what I'm grateful for, my appreciation. Um, but throughout the day, yeah, I kind of catch myself when I get too joyful, up, excited, and such, as well as too cynical and depressed and stuff. I just kind of see it. And as I've mentioned, repeatedly, I'm much more kinder of it. It's again, I'm not taking these thoughts and feelings as personally as ever in the past. It's there, okay, and it's not good, it's not bad, it's just all part of this human experience and such. And usually when there's an awareness of this, and again, I can take those 3 steps back, then it's very easy for me to go back into an attitude of gratitude and say, thank you, God, for giving me this wonderful human experience right now. This is really cool. I'm enjoying this and such. So, yeah, that's my prayer and meditation. It's present every day, but it's not rigid.
Yeah. Good. Very good. Yeah, and what's alive for me in response to that as well too is just respecting and being aware of whether or not the individual needs it to either be passive or active. At the moment, I'm actively in an intense meditation period where I read the same prayer 3 times a day for 30 days. And then the next 30 days, I read another prayer 3 times a day for 30 days. And there's 10 of these prayers. So usually I'm more passive with it, but I've been more active with it. This is the 6 month. I'm almost done the 6 month of it, going into the 7th month. So yeah, as we close out step 11, I will just ask the listener about whether or not you are practicing a deliberate and conscious meditative or reflective practice, if that's necessary, or do you find being more passive and letting it come to you? That could be a subject, that could be a topic for a conversation at another time. So, Randy, thank you very much. We are going to pause here with step 11, and we are going to be presenting step 12 here.